Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for coming to Meetup number 6. We are very lucky to have Charles Connell here with us as well, who's going to be talking a little bit more to practical applications to health scoring. So thank you again for coming along today. Charles has also indicated he's got a bit of a slide deck to go through as well. So please feel free to leave some questions in the chat. Otherwise, save your questions to the end and you'll be able to take yourselves off mute and ask any questions that you're looking to get off your chest. So without further ado, Charles, thanks very much for joining us and take it away.
Thanks, Simon. So can everyone see my screen for starters? Yeah, we're all good, cool. But so yeah, I'm Charles Connell. I have, I guess, founded and exited a few sort of fairly successful multinational SaaS businesses, and customer success has always been very much at the core of how we've run our businesses. I think it's probably safe to say we're part of the group of early adopters around the whole concept of customer success in Australia, like well over 10 years ago. To the extent where the first hire at our last business was a customer success manager. So we get it. We get it from a business point of view and a value point of view. Like we understand how important it is and how it's not just a departmental concept. It's a company-wide concept. So that's how we've sort of always run our businesses. Very strong customer success culture. So I'm currently the founder of the SaaS company called Userlot. So we specialize in customer success technology. And we basically use our experience to also provide consultancy services to organizations who might be getting started with customer success or sort of looking to upscale their CS efforts. We do help with systems implementation, including some of our, I guess now, competitors. So yeah, we can talk about that a bit later. We do get a lot of questions about customer health scoring, so I thought it was an interesting topic for this Meetup forum. So if anyone's already using a health scoring system, some of the points I'm going to cover might seem a little bit basic, but just bear with us because they might be relevant to others, and hopefully you can sort of share your experience at the end. The agenda, so I just wanted to cover, what is a health score? Why should you use it? Some of the common inputs that we've seen that work when you're setting up a health scoring system. Getting started, how you set up a health scoring system, and then using that health scoring system, and then maybe if we can have a bit of a group discussion. So I'll run through that quickly. So first thing, what is a customer health score? So basically a customer health score is a measurement of the current state of the relationship between your customer and your product or your brand. So why would you need that? Why should you set it up? I guess like health scoring, it's a really good tool that can be used to predict outcomes. And those outcomes include things like churn, contraction, or expansion. So on its own, a health score, it's just a number. It doesn't really do anything. So I've got Ben entering the room. Welcome, Ben. On its own, yeah, a health score is just a number, but if you use it properly to drive actions, health scoring can be a very, very powerful customer success tool. Customer health score inputs. So health scores can be complicated. They can include hundreds of metrics, literally. We've seen it, we've done it. They don't need to be. I think overcomplication can make your score not only difficult to set up and to implement, but it can make it really hard to understand too, so you can start to lose the value of what you're actually trying to do. So we've worked with a lot of organizations in setting up health scoring, and we've also done our own extensive research, obviously for scoring for our own products and businesses. And I think what you'll generally find is successful health scoring has a mix of qualitative and quantitative inputs. And most commonly, these 4 inputs I've got listed here. So product adoption. So basically, how far has your customer progressed in their implementation journey? And this is the journey that you want to see them progress through. So an example in my previous business, we basically provided a platform where users could build interactive web tools and components to collect feedback from their communities. So when they were working on different projects, a lot of government clients. So what we wanted to see them doing in a product is, we wanted to see them in there building the tools, but also we needed to see them publishing the tools, moderating the feedback, analyzing the data, and running the reports. So if they did all of those things, we knew that they're actually getting value from a product and they're more likely to renew or expand. Product usage. So that's like I would define that as how often the customer is using your key features or your sticky features of your product. It should be a measure of actually using the product, and it should never be a count of logins. So again, if I look back at a previous business, I wanted to see the users frequently creating interactive tools, but most importantly, we needed to see them publishing the tools and collecting and analyzing the feedback. So if they're just creating the tools but not publishing them and actually using them, then they weren't getting value and they weren't using the product as intended. So don't count logins. Usage data needs to be normalized as well. Very important point. So if you've got an account and they've done something 10 times in a week, and you might say that's great. But if that account has a single user versus 20 users, that's a very different scenario. So make sure that you normalize your data so that you do identify those indicators of churn or contraction risk. And normalizing doesn't need to be complicated. It can be literally as simple as dividing the occurrences by the number of users or seats that you have in your account. Customer satisfaction. This is a bit of a hot topic, I think, at the moment. There's a lot of talk about customer satisfaction surveys, new ways of collecting satisfaction data. I think we could do a whole session on that if we wanted, but I think the reality is the most common still remains NPS, and then probably followed by CSAT and CS. I personally have no issue with NPS. I think it's very useful, but I think there's value in like straying from conventions. I guess like tweak your questions a bit. Make sure the questions that you're asking are geared towards the answers that you want. And also we found using different delivery methods is very important as well. So, consider in-app versus email, for example, because they can provide very different results. Again, I'm not going to talk too much on that because that's for another session. CSM sentiment, very important. So this is how your CSM or account owner perceives the happiness of your customer based on their interactions with them. So, all the other three metrics, they might look great, excellent, but you've just had a phone call with one of your customers, you've found out they've been acquired and their parent company is pushing them to, adopt some of their platforms, which could, put them at a massive risk. Or there can also be things like some of your, key power users or main supporters in an organization. They let you know that they're leaving, and that can introduce risk as well. So, there's a whole different array of different things you can identify through CSM sentiment, and it's hugely important. And as a customer success manager, you need to be measuring and recording that as often as you can. Right, so there's heaps more inputs that we could go through, but I think if we just stick with these four, I think these are sort of what I would consider the core inputs for health scoring. And we'll touch on some of the other ones further down the track. Right, so I just wanted to go through this scenario of just creating a simple health score and just show you, that it doesn't need to take months and doesn't need to be complicated to get something that can bring you value quickly. So let's use those four input categories. And then there's lots of different ways of scoring, and they can include, the color code or traffic light scale, a graded scale, so A, B, C, D, F. You can have complex percentage scales where multiple scores may make up a total score. So I'm just going to stick with probably also what's the most common, which is this numeric color code scale. So we'll go with 0 to 100. That could also be 0 to 10. Choose whatever range makes sense. So in this instance, I'm saying 0 to 60 is red. So that assumes that the account is at risk. And if you leave that account alone, there's a high likelihood that they'll churn. So immediate action is required. 61 to 75. You tell me if that's yellow, orange, or amber. depending on where you're coming from. So that assumes that your account's okay if you leave it alone. But, you know, sorry, hold on a second. I've got some notes and I've lost it. Yeah, it assumes your account's okay, but it could be better. So, you know, with those orange ones, what you should have is a strategy towards nurturing them towards more value in your product. And that's how you're going to push them back up to that healthy scale. So that 76 to 100 green range, so that's deemed to indicate that the account is, you know, healthy and happy. So you should continue with your standard plan and nurture them towards loyalty. All right, so you've got 4 different inputs and the, you know, 4 different data sources in, you know, 4 different ranges. So you need to apply a common scale. So the, you know, a simpler way is just use these 3 categories of at risk, okay, and healthy. Give them a point scoring. So I've got 0, 50, and 100 for each of those. So I'm saying anything less than 40% adoption is deemed at risk. 41 to 80% is okay. And if they're above 80%, they're healthy and they get the full 100 points. Same thing for usage, less than 10%, 0, 10 to 20, 50, 20 plus gets the full 100. NPS, so your detractors will give them 0, your passives get 50, and your promoters get 100. And then sentiment is, we'll assume it's 0 to 10. So if they're less than 5, they're at risk. If they're, you know, 6 to 8, they're okay. And if they're above 9 or 10, we're going to give them full points. So we look at let's say we've got an actual customer, so they're 50% adopted, you know, based on what we want them to be doing. Their normalized usage is, you know, 15 occurrences of, you know, whether that's publishing a widget or you know, creating something or whatever we've deemed as you know, valuable usage data. Their NPS is 90%, so they get full points, and their sentiment is 7. So it's as simple as taking, you know, totaling those points based on our scale, so that they get 250 points divided by the 4 inputs. And they get a health score of 62.5, which puts them in that okay category based on how we defined it at the start. So that means with this customer, we should basically try and nurture them towards more value. So, you know, we're going to have a plan to do that, whether it's playbooks or an email sequence or whatever it is. Let's make sure, you know, these orange ones, we have a strategy to do something with them. Right, so the next step is making that more accurate. And that's when you introduce weighting for your inputs. And to properly introduce weighting, you've really got to look at your data, and you've got to, you know, work out what your predictors are. So if I use an example, I've analyzed my churned customers, and I can see 75% of them have a low product usage. So that's a pretty strong correlation. So that means that's a pretty good predictor. Whereas only 30% of those same customers have submitted a low NPS score. Right, so that obviously is going to be a weaker predictor. So I'm going to apply weighting to my scoring now. So I'm going to say adoption, well, that stays the same at 25%. Usage, because I've identified that that's a good predictor, I'm going to bump that up to 40%. Satisfaction, you know, I've seen that, well, that's a weaker predictor, so let's drop that down to 10, and we'll leave sentiment at 25%. If we run through those same, you know, points based on our scale, and now apply the weighting, and then we total those scores, they've dropped from 65 to 55 based on what we've identified as product usage being a strong predictor. And that puts them down to at risk, which means that, you know, they're going to get immediate attention, and you know, they're deemed more likely to contract or churn. So yeah, very simple example, but even, you know, this simple setup, you know, if you start with something like this, you can, you know, get value straight away. Right, so we've got a number, that's great. Like I said before, that really doesn't do a lot. So even before you set up your health score, you really have to work out what outcomes you're trying to predict. And often those outcomes are going to be based on what's currently happening with your product or customers. So let's say we look at 2 businesses. One of them has a really high churn rate in the first 12 months versus another business that's got really, really strong customer retention. They've got, you know, a large group of happy, loyal customers. So for the first group, we're obviously looking at predicting that churn and you know, working on decreasing churn. Whereas that second group, you know, they're not churning. So what we want to do is use our health score to identify expansion opportunities. So we're going to look at, ways of identifying, behavioral patterns to identify opportunities to upsell or cross-sell or, expand revenue. So that's something you need to look at right at the start, even before you set up your scoring, and that's going to help drive, what inputs you're looking at and how you set up the weighting. Some of the other common uses, obviously identify risks, including contraction and churn. You can identify expansion opportunities. Use your health scores to identify loyal customers who can obviously help with brand advocacy, and your loyal customers are very underutilized in most organizations because they can be a really strong sales resource. Use your scoring to discover success and failure patterns. Obviously, you can provide more accurate renewal forecasts with an accurate health scoring system. And health scoring is a great way to prioritize your team efforts and resources. So, make sure your resources are being applied, where they're going to add value rather than, where they don't need to be. I'm not going to go into these points in a whole lot of detail, because what I'd prefer is actually if we have a bit of discussion at the end on how you guys might be, using your health score and what are some of the ways that you're getting value. But then, end of the day, you need to use your health scores to drive actions. And if you have systemized your, your customer success approach, a lot of this can be automated. So obviously you can use, customer success variations, increases, decreases to create alerts. So, you might need to alert the account owner that something has happened or something has changed or their score has decreased. Sometimes if they stay at poor health for, a period of time, the alert might need to be escalated to, someone more senior so they don't get missed. They can be used to initiate things like email sequences for nurturing or, introducing other product features for upselling. You can build complex playbooks that have, numerous steps that, are designed to minimize risk or recover unhealthy accounts, or also for that expansion, upselling, and increasing revenue concept. And obviously, you're going to want to use your customer health score to create tasks and other automations, and automations could even be in other systems. And by tasks, I mean, if an account health score is trending down, for example, it might create a task for the account owner to perform an account inspection, or to contact some of the key people in that organization. So again, it'd be interesting just to hear from you guys on what sort of playbooks or automations you're actually driving with your current health scoring. But so once you have done that, the basic health scoring, I think that's where everyone should start. You need to create iterations and work on that continuous improvement. So test, measure, repeat, test, measure, repeat. Obviously, segment your customers. So your different groups of your customers can behave very, very different and are going to require different scoring approaches. So for example, your new customers versus customers that have been with you for multiple years, or your enterprise customers versus your lower plan, lower tier, low value customers. You're going to have a different approach, obviously, for them. So segment your customers and expand your inputs. So some of the other ones that I guess we've used in the past, some of your support and operations data, your customer history, how long have they been with you? How long, how many times have they renewed, account growth, those sort of things. Integrations. So there's, your marketing CRM, or, there's phone apps, or, there's probably 50 different integrations that we could talk about. Your sales CRM, there's all sorts of other tools you have in your organization that can provide data to help you do more accurate health scoring. Your marketing engagement is quite a useful one. So what you'll find is, people who are, frequently visiting your website, reading your resources, going to your help resources, watching your webinars, all those sort of things generally indicate that they're probably going to be a happier customer and can trend towards loyalty quicker. If you provide services revenue can also be a good driver for health scoring. And one of the ones that I've always liked to use is customer ROI. So, if they're using your product, are they getting a multiple of what they've paid in earnings or in savings. And if you can prove that, then it's pretty easy to predict if they're gonna continue to renew or churn with you when they're using your product. Challenges. I mean, let's face it, it's not easy creating a health score because of, largely because of all the, different data sources and things like that. So that's why I would always recommend keep it simple and expand on it, so you don't get bogged down in, for months trying to set up some majestical system. Obviously, there's political challenges. So, you need to get buy-in from your senior team. That, like, you should. Hopefully, that's less of an issue from senior members of your team, unless you're the one that's trying to introduce customer success. I think most like C-level and founders understand the value of customer success. Maybe you guys can tell me otherwise. Getting access to your product data, that can be difficult. And obviously, there's a few things that you can probably do to make that easier. Just got someone with a lot of background noise. Is that Ben? Sorry, Ben, I'm going to mute you. There we go. Right, so getting access to your product data, you need to have a bit of a plan with that. You need to understand how your development team works. They didn't build your product with customer success data, at the front of their mind, kind of thing. So, like, understand what data is available in your product. Spend some time, understand it, and then bring your technical resources on as soon as you can. Get that buy-in from some senior people in your organization, so that you've got a bit of clout to make things happen. But also understand that can take time as well. So your technical resources generally have a pretty full plate with all of the other scheduled tasks that they've got. So have a bit of a plan, see if you can get it scheduled into their workload and work through it that way. Integration. So if you are integrating to other systems, that can be complex, but also there's a lot of third-party tools like Zapier. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with Zapier, where modern SaaS platforms, can integrate through the secure API connections. So definitely look at Zapier, even if that's just a tool to sort of expose what data might be available through their API, and then take it the next step further. And yeah, look, let's face it, you can end up with complex aggregations, weighting, calculations, all these sort of things. And that's why customer success platforms exist. So I've listed some of the most common ones down on the bottom. I think we've had experience with all of those. We've got ours there in the middle, obviously, because all of the systems that exist, I think they've got their strengths and weaknesses, and you need to evaluate them before you sort of choose what's right for your organization. There's huge variances in cost, obviously, and complexity. So worth a look. If anyone is going through that process again, we've sort of had experience with all of them, so happy to chat about that. Final thoughts before we have a bit of a discussion. So on its own, a health score is not going to solve problems. I think I read the other day an example where if everyone who has a home gym set up in the garage should have rock hard abs, but the reality is you don't. You know what I mean? So your health score needs to be applied, and you need to use it to actually drive actions. Always look at trends, not just your current score, and understand how your score was calculated. So you might have a customer that's sitting at a score of 7, which you think, yeah, that's great. But if they were 9 last month and they've dropped to 7, that's a pretty big deal. So look at, to take a holistic look at your health score data. Customer success is, the concept itself is about being proactive and having a strategic approach to guide your customers through their life cycle journey. I guess from my experience, if your overall approach is correct, your health score should largely take care of itself. You shouldn't just sit back and wait for things to turn red. You should already have that plan of how you're guiding your customers through that customer lifecycle journey. So yes, use health scoring. Yes, it's important. Yes, you can do wonderful things with it, but it's not the only thing you should be doing. And we do see people making that mistake where they just spend all their time setting up the customer health score, completely ignore, having a strategy to guide your customers through that customer lifecycle journey. So keep that in mind when you're dealing with health scores. And that's kind of all I had as far as my slides. I thought if we could have a bit of a discussion, some of the points I've thrown out, and you can, we can discuss anything really, but what are some of the most useful health score inputs that you've used in your organization? And obviously, everyone's is different. What are some of the biggest challenges you're either currently facing or you did face when you were trying to set up health scoring? And how are you using your, your health score data to actually drive actions in your organization? So, what playbooks have you found work really well? What sort of triggers or actions are you actually implementing based on your health score? So where do we start? Useful health score inputs. Someone give us some feedback.
I would say the CSM sentiment, but it's also one of the most political. We seem to need to have quantitative data to support. Whereas if we have a CSM sentiment, but the problem that I've got is that I have a range of accounts that are bundled up onto a head office account or a master account, and it doesn't show adequately the sub accounts that are under there. So I'm always qualifying or quantifying what's going on in those sub accounts. So a CSM sentiment is super important for me to portray to management how the accounts are going. But yeah, because sometimes there is not a qualitative bit of data behind it, I think it's hard for them to take, to be perfectly honest. But I think it's so critical to include, because if you read these reports without me standing there, it's all looking green, it's all rosy, but I might have this little piece of information that says, actually, no, it's not. This guy's just left, this guy's come in and he doesn't like X, Y, or Z. So, this is what's coming over the horizon. And I think to miss out on that information is just madness. So yeah, I think it's one of the most important, but also one of the most controversial.
For sure.
One of the, hi guys, it's Jared Dunning. One of the other things that I've found in the customer success is that sentiment piece. Well, it's important, like you said, Ben. One of the interesting things you can have, and I've come to this crowd, you can have a customer that you think is really annoyed with your product. And they're saying, oh, why didn't you have this feature? And you should do this, and you should do that. And they give you a litany of stuff that you wanted in there. And in fact, they're not your worst customer.
They love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What they're doing is they're trying to drive you. And to an untrained eye, that sentiment could say, oh, shit, this is in trouble. All right. And the other comment that I have on this is, trying to, one of the other things, because, to try and get that data, and one of the other things as well is other influencing factors like the amount of tickets a customer might raise. Are they late paying their invoices? Are they talking to the sales guys and complaining to him, which again is sentiment. But there are other, if you can't get some of this data for whatever reason, and I'll give you the example as well as ours. The product we sell is a backup solution for Microsoft 365, which means it's an insurance policy. So you set it up, you don't go in and use it. You very rarely go in and use it, right? So it's hard to get that sentiment of, well, are they using it or not using it? You've got a backup, the backup's there, it happens automatically. But the other flip side of it is getting them to understand, the value of it and doing that. So do they raise tickets about it? Do they do other stuff? Is how we try and gather that information. So it's good to kind of be open to other avenues of data, I guess, is probably the biggest thing.
We've got a lot of, I think we've got a lot of avenues of data, and this is kind of the qualifier that we use at the end. I think we've probably got too many bits and pieces that we try to pull out from a range. But yeah, I mean, we log client sentiment in every interaction that we have with them via our sales platform. However, even that, all it takes is a CSM or a salesperson to inappropriately put the sentiment in or not put the interaction in, which does happen. And all of a sudden, it's a false sort of reading. It only takes one angry meeting for a client to go from pretty in the green to pretty in the red, right? And it just depends on what persona that person is. If it's the CTO or CEO, it's probably all hands on deck, right?
Yeah, agreed.
Cool. Does anyone else have any more comments about health score inputs that they've used that we haven't covered? If not, let's hear about challenges, because I know you've had challenges.
For adoption, we probably have a more narrow approach of the actual adoption of product as opposed to adoption of the client on their success journey.
I've always, one thing I've always found challenging with health scoring is the impact of support tickets on health score, just for the fact that, you know, as I think someone mentioned just before, Gerard did, was interaction with your team is not actually a bad thing, but excessive support tickets can be a negative thing if it is actual, I guess, linked to a development item or an actual bug, right? Where if they're just inquiring about how to do something that they don't know how to do, then that's actually quite a positive factor because they're engaging with the product and engaging with the team. So yeah, that's one area that I've always struggled to identify the best way to apply support tickets to a health score, whether they're actually a positive or negative impact. Because, you know, even no support tickets can reflect disengagement rather than happiness. So that's one area I've always found challenging.
Yeah, I think I read once that your best customers are going to be customers that have had a problem and were willing to work with you to solve those problems. Like they become your best customer.
Yeah, definitely. In a previous life, when I dealt with warranties on products, sometimes our best customers were those that had a warranty claim because you were able to prove to them just how good you were in terms of the customer service side of things following on from that.
Anyone else, or should we jump to how are you using your health scores? I guess just on challenges, like from my experience, like there are a lot of technical challenges when especially if you're in a smaller organization and you're trying to get dev resources that, you know, have 50,000 other things that they need to be prioritizing. You know, so that can be challenging, and especially if you're trying to implement a platform that's a bit rigid and you know, there's more work than you anticipated to get things in the way you wanted to use them. So that can introduce political challenges as well, because sometimes you need the political aspect of it to get that work prioritized and completed. Cool. So does anyone want to give us an example of, you know, give us a direct action that's being triggered by your health score, whether that's, you know, to try and identify at-risk customers, and what are you doing when you do identify them at risk, or it'd be great to get some examples on the other end of the scale where you're identifying expansion opportunities or upselling and cross-selling.
Yeah, so one that we use here is basically upon renewal, we have different playbooks based on the health score. So basically, if the customer's in the red, we will start an engagement cadence further out from the renewal process so that we can, obviously, depending on the size of customer, we already have an engagement cadence, but if they are a tech touch customer that's in a red health score bracket, we then will begin that engagement around renewal earlier to gain an understanding of what are the pain points, what are the items that we need to resolve to get us to a renewal. So that's probably one of the key items we really focus on is early engagement around risks at renewal time.
That's great. So I just realized I didn't have the chat widget open. I hope I haven't missed anything. Cool. Does anyone have an example of, you know, how you are using positive health scoring for upselling, cross-selling, expansion?
I can jump in again if there isn't anyone else.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, one example we use is around advocacy. Obviously, we're really new in the Australian region, so advocacy is huge for us. So we really leverage that green health score. We as a CSM reach out to those customers and give them probably slightly better treatment in terms of the playbook that is applied. And then off the back of that, it BCCs in our advocacy team. And then they will, once that customer progresses through our playbook cycle, then the advocacy team reaches out and basically asks for a reference, whether that be a reference check directly with the customer or through through a case study type process as well. So we really leverage those green health scores to identify our targets there and get really targeted around who we're reaching out to for advocacy.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, that's something we've done a lot in the past as well. And yeah, I think, like if you're working in customer success, a big part of your job is, can you extract more revenue from your existing customers? So, you shouldn't just be focusing on who's not going to renew, where your churn's coming from. So I think, if you are using health scoring, make sure that you are using that as a trigger for expansion as well. Yeah, and like you said, the brand advocacy type actions, whether you're doing a co-hosted webinar or a case study, or all those sort of things, they're really, really useful assets. I've got a comment from Simon who's had to drop out. What process do you recommend for companies coming from no health scoring platform? Where can they start in your experience? What methods have your clients used to obtain this useful data early on, and what do you recommend? Great question. And it is a bit of a pain point because some of the existing platforms are, they're priced at a point where, it's difficult to justify that cost in a smaller organization. Even if you're, a mid to larger size organization, it's difficult to sometimes, get that purchase across the line as well. You'll get feedback that, we don't need another CRM. We've already got HubSpot. We've already got whatever. At the end of the day, those are different systems. Unfortunately, sorry, just got to let someone in. We've seen Excel used, which I hate Excel, but or Google Sheets. Like sometimes you can just put the data in that, so you just have a weekly, monthly, bi-weekly recurring task to collect the data and aggregate the scores. Yeah, look, at the end of the day, I think from my experience anyway, the only systems I've seen that are purpose-built for customer health scoring are those, customer success management systems. I haven't come across anything else that, that is really built for it. So it comes down to probably doing it sort of manual. I'm not sure, you might be able to look at tools, some of the more dashboardy tools like Clipfolio and some of those tools, which can sort of aggregate the data and, build sort of custom reports and dashboards. So that is probably one of the first places I would look, I guess, if I was looking beyond the existing customer success tools. But I think, look, at the end of the day, I would probably always just go there first. I've got a comment from Colin. What frequency are people reviewing health scores versus renewals, etc.? And are you using your health score internally in customer success, or do you always push this up to C-level only when you say lose a key renewal? Does anyone want to comment on that?
We review health scores as a team monthly. However, CSMs probably review it, I would say, weekly, just to make sure that the data going in, the calculations are as expected. We use the health score internally in CS, but it does go up to the C-level, so it goes up to the CEO and the Chief Client Officer.
Cool. And how often do they have visibility of that?
It's live, so they can see it whenever they want. How often they actually go in and look at it? We've been told it's fairly regular. It's not daily, but it'll be weekly. So maybe once a week, once every 2 weeks at max is kind of my thoughts. However, I've never asked them point blank, to be honest.
Cool. Anyone else have experience with that?
Yeah, I was going to say, we use Churn Zero at the moment. In regards to the way we use that, the team, all the CSMs have access to that all the time. It's probably, for me personally, I review it always when I'm going into a call with a customer, so it's part of my prep for a call. But I'm also reviewing that I've got different segments based on different thresholds. And I'm reviewing that probably on a daily basis. I also have alerts that trigger to me based on certain events. So if a customer takes a spike in a certain direction, I will get an alert that pushes me towards that and review. In regards to our C-level team, I know that our C-level team have an aggregated view of health scores, so they're able to see like overall health score by team, and then if they click into that, they can dig in. So similar to Ben mentioned, they've got visibility of that all the time. I can't comment how often they look. I do know that I get the odd outreach and saying, hey, why did these customers spike to a red health score? So I know they're looking at it. But I'd say it's probably weekly that they check it out and see how we're tracking.
Cool. It's going to depend, I guess, on, you know, where your organization is at and what type of customers that you have. I mean, if everything's going well, you're probably not going to look at it as much as you would otherwise. Cool. Colin, did you have any comments on that specifically as well yourself from your experience?
Not specifically. It's more, yeah, just the getting input from other people really, because I mean, obviously I've sat more on the development side than the CS, so just like to see really that you know, what the actual people are really doing from a C level. Definitely, I've noticed probably what you just mentioned, Charles, that being on a C level before, even though it was a CTO role, I noticed it was more when it went to the red that they seemed to sort of look at it. But I definitely see the value of it the other way as well. And I actually like that what Ben just brought up about, you know, like sending it into the advocacy team. I think that's really important. So it's nice to see that it's actually being used that way as well.
For sure. I was just looking at our attendees for the meeting this morning. I read an article about the state of customer success in 2022, and apparently 66% of our industry is female, but we somehow haven't hit that with our registration. We'll work on promoting the next one. Cool. Is there any other
Sorry, Charles, that I don't know if people saw that survey go around. Maybe you should link it if they didn't, but that I found that was interesting that, you know, obviously adoption is still such a massive part of CS, obviously, but that advocacy part, like sort of expansion out and advocacy is not still, it was pretty low, you know, time spent by a CS. So it's just interesting that the health score, I sort of feeds into that, you know, the better we can get health scoring, the better we can get people not churning. I think it'd be nice to see that move, if you know what I mean.
It would be good to get, yeah. Where was that report?
I think customers, I can't remember. What's their client success? Is that?
Oh, yeah.
I remember their bloody name. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I know that one.
I think they had a webinar yesterday. I think that's what it came
Oh,
from.
they did, yeah.
Yeah, it was from the webinar, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
I can
We've got the link direct to the PDF if you want now.
Yeah. That'd be good.
Yeah, I'll send it to the group in LinkedIn.
Thanks, Charles.
Yeah, that'd be good actually.
Cool. I mean, I think Australia, the trends here are probably a little bit different to what's happening in the US. I think obviously the concept is a little bit newer here. You know, and the way we run a business is probably a bit different here too. So, you know, I don't think it completely reflects on what we do here, but I think like we'll probably catch up to, or, you know, mimic what they're doing for sooner rather than later as well.
It's interesting because from my perspective, I don't think it's hit the mainstream yet. I think a lot of companies have customer success managers for the sake of having them, but not necessarily. So they basically view them, and I'm having this challenge at the moment, they view them as account managers.
Yeah.
That's success, right? So, and that's something to break, because if you look at any comparison of what an account manager is against customer success manager, account manager is there to upsell something, license renewal or, you know, new product or whatever. Really, they're not really interested in how they're using it or what benefits they're getting out of it. Now, that's, I know, disingenuous to those guys, because I know a lot of relationship manager guys have had, you know, customers for 10 years that they know really intimately and stuff. So I'm being very generalized, but understanding the value of where customer success comes in. And, you know, it's easy to use the kind of things like SAP and stuff like that, where they get 60% of their revenue from existing customers, not from new business. And they're a well-established large corporate thing, right? But I saw an interesting one statistic the other way. If your churn hits 4%, you're actually flatlining as a business.
Yeah.
So you're not growing, you're just basically surviving, right? When you look at net revenue retention, you need to be between like 105 and 110 really to have any growth. I mean, you see stats coming out from the Americans say, oh, you know, you need to be at 150 NRR. Well, yeah, that might be one case out of 100. but the average is kind of between 105, 110, right? So if you're doing that, your business is actually self-sustaining and growing. So, you know, I don't think that is fully understood here in Australia, the value of what customer success can bring. I think it's a function, but it's shoved in under something else. You know, that's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah, no, look, I think CS, especially account managers, is still very much a, you know, I won't say short term, but this thing everyone's always, you know, even if you set a playbook for your negative health score to go and get your renewal, you're really focusing on that next renewal. Whereas you're really talking about CS and customer value, you're thinking more than one renewal cycle, you know, and that's a hard thing for a business to think that far in advance sometimes, unless they're really mature and know what they're doing and have a good vision. You know, they're not just trying to stop the churn, you know.
Yeah, and it's interesting because one of the companies we work for in Europe, Resolve, we were ITSM automation, and one of the things we had was a reporting system that, you know, if you had a ticket that normally took a person 10 or 15 minutes to do, and we were doing it in, you know, under 30 seconds, we calculated, well, if it took somebody 10 minutes, it was X amount of pounds. We did it in this, so therefore we saved you the difference. And you count up all the tickets. You say, well, this month we saved you this amount of money, and that, you know, that's the other benefit that, you know, the customer success team can look at it from that point of view of what the value, overall value is to the customer, as well as, you know, the usage and everything else that you get. But I think that gets missed, you know, and you need to know your customer's business outcomes. What are they trying to achieve with this? Because it's not might necessarily what you think it is for your product. They could be using for completely different, but they're still getting benefit out of all the features. To just not using it the way you've seen it before, and that's not a bad thing. It's just different.
That's potentially a new market.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I mean, that comes down to concepts like creating a success plan for your individual accounts, and, you know, really identifying what they're trying to get out of your product right at the start. You know, all these things, I think, like when you're seeing what's happening out of the US, like they're becoming more mainstream, and like I think they will here too. And it's a bit of a no-brainer, like having owned a couple of businesses and just understanding, you know, the revenue growth that you can get by doing it properly. I think, you know, it's gonna come and quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. All right. If there's nothing else, maybe we'll wrap it up a little bit early. We'll just get some feedback. The attendance for this was probably a little bit low. Is the lunchtime time slot good, bad? Would you prefer a different time?
I'm Perth based, so it was 10 o'clock for me, so that was good.
Would you prefer 10 o'clock to 12 o'clock?
It doesn't. It depends on what the day is. The time doesn't matter. It just depends on the clients. So, you know.
Sure. I mean, personally, I think we did initially try and have this as an in-person in Sydney, you know, in the evening, which I think we should definitely work towards testing that too, because, you know, face-to-face is good, especially now that we can.
Yeah. If there's anyone else on the call that's interested in being involved in that, please reach out to myself or even Charles. What we probably need to be able to facilitate something in Sydney is looking for venues. And if anyone has office space or, you know, a boardroom that they're willing to get involved in and, you know, co-host the event, then we can definitely, you know, line something up. That's our biggest challenge. You know, we are a free community at this stage. We have no intentions of changing that for the time being. So it is one of those things that if there aren't ticket charges, then we do need spaces that we can work with. So yeah, happy to connect with anyone that's interested in being involved, and we can go from there.
Hey Ben, one of the things you might want to look into, because they have it here in Brisbane, was Brisbane City Council have a hub that can be used for different people to do anything, and they have up here anyway. They have a you know, stage with a bunch of seats in it in a room. It's all free. I guarantee you, Sydney will have something similar somewhere.
Yeah.
Have some sort of development hub or startup hub or whatever. So if you get in touch with the council down there,
yep,
see if you can find, you know, is it one council in Sydney or is it multiple ones?
Sydney City's, I think Sydney City's on its own, but there's a lot of very close surrounding suburbs. I'd assume what you're talking about would be around maybe like UTS, the university. There'd be a startup hub there.
Yeah,
So,
well,
And there's a
this
bunch
one,
of them.
this one's
actually.
smack in the center of Brisbane because like it was an old cinema that they owned and they took over and did it.
Okay.
But just a suggestion, you probably find something similar down there, I would say, in the center of Sydney. Somebody have that kind of thing. The council would have some sort of office or space you can use that you might be able to do. And I know this one in Brisbane, you can use it in at night time, you know, in the evenings.
Okay. I'll dig into it. Thank you.
It would be nice to have a licensed venue, just saying.
Mm.
I got some quotes from licensed venues. It's not cheap, unfortunately.
Yeah, but the other thing is, if you go to WeWork and offer to do a thing at their place, they do free beer. And if you do it, you allow their subscribers to cover, you know, whatever it is, to join as well. They're always dead keen on doing that kind of stuff. So,
Okay. Well, I'm in a WeWork,
There's-
so I'll talk to the front desk team as well.
yeah, they're pretty good like that. I've done one or two up here in Brisbane in WeWorks.
Okay.
Yeah, they're fairly open to that kind of stuff.
Awesome. Thank you.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks everyone. I'm not sure if we've got a plan for the next one of these. Maybe we'll have a chat on the LinkedIn platform. There's probably lots of hot topics that, that we could cover. I mean, does anyone have a suggestion while we're on the call? No? All right. We'll talk about it on LinkedIn. Thanks, everyone. If there's anything specific anyone wants to chat to me about, please reach out. You can find me on LinkedIn. I think I've got it on this slide. Just look for Charles Connell AUS, or I'm in Customer Success Australia, the group. And yeah, happy to help. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.